States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, announced by the chairman, I have none at this time. Approval of minutes of January 9, 2014. Moved by Gould, second by Traynor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays? Ayes have it, so moved. Public comment. Okay, old business, we'll get right into it. Continued discussion regarding amending Will County Code of Ordinance pertaining to Chapter 93, open burning or nuisance fires. This is the latest version of that, which was in our packet.
And there are extra copies up here.
Go ahead, Bruce.
The version that you have in your packet today was I put together as a consequence of the discussions that took place in caucus prior to last month's board meeting. And it has limitations as to when you can burn. The only other restriction really in there is if for the COPD, there's a 300 feet away from your neighbor. If you're put on notice by an enforcement authority that your neighbor has a cardiopulmonary issue. Those two things. So I want to be clear, it doesn't outlaw burning, it limits it to 2 periods of time, in the early spring and late fall. And it's got the COPD in there, and ag is exempt. The intention is that ag be exempt. If you have the property that's being used for agricultural purposes, it's exempt. So you can burn there. Because that's not where our problems are coming from. So now, if you have any questions we want to discuss, go ahead. I want to be clear as close.
I was looking online too, and I did, the ordinance for burning, and this problem is not unique to our area. I mean, it seems like this problem is all over the United States. And something else that came up was the private nuisance law. So I was just wondering if some of these issues can't be solved by going through the private nuisance law instead of trying to make this one umbrella ordinance for everything in every neighborhood, and I'm just not sure how
That's a question for Mary Tate,
how that might play into it.
I'm not sure what you mean by private nuisance. I mean, to me that indicates a civil remedy for individuals, not really for government. Government deals with public nuisances, which is basically what we said, is that open burning is a public nuisance under certain circumstances.
No, I was just, what I had printed out was just talking about if one neighbor is not cooperating with another one to give them the...
Well, under the law, they always have the right to go into the court system and indicate that their neighbor is creating a nuisance, and they can ask for an injunction to stop that. That's available to them right now. Okay?
Well, that was my only thing in trying to... I mean, there's so many moving parts to this that these people say, okay, these people say, I don't want. So, I mean, I understand that some people, have the medical issues, and I understand that, but I'm just thinking that, if my neighbor has asthma, maybe we can work it out instead of having this whole umbrella ordinance that covers, which we can't seem to come to an agreement on. And I'm thinking that this issue has only been 13 months in the talking stages, and now I'm finding out it's like 8 years in the talking stages. So,
Tom?
The distance was changed from 1,000 feet to 300. I suggested that so to have less impact on the neighborhood. You'd have 2 or 3 lots away from where this person might live.
Right.
So you're impacting less people. Maybe it'd be more palatable that way, and still be able to protect the people that have this respiratory problem.
I had friends, I've actually talked to friends with respiratory problems, and when they go to their neighbor and say, please stop this, they do. Okay? And I just have a hard time creating legislation for good neighbor behavior.
You're not doing it for the good ones.
I didn't know that. And so I just heard from our attorney that there is an avenue for people that have nuisance issues. They can go and take these people to court and say, these neighbors are not, they're causing a problem for me.
Can I address that issue after?
No, but just one more point here I want to make. In order for them to be able to go and say they have a respiratory issue, they got to go to a doctor and get this whole thing anyway. They got to show that, right? So they're going to have to jump through a bunch of hoops just to get that accomplished. Why not just go to court? Because to make a law for 1 or 2 people or 3 people that are going to be problematic with their neighbors, I just don't think that that's appropriate. That's not our job as a government body.
Steve? Yeah.
No, what I was going to say is that Will County is a place that people have lived here a long time. So if you own a piece of property for 50 years, now all of a sudden next door somebody moves in and they say that smoke bothers them, and they go to their doctor and they get a note. Now my property rights that I've had and I've used for 50 years are no good. You can throw them out the window. I think we have an ordinance and we don't need to change it. Just leave it alone.
I mean, this ordinance that we have in our package
The
today?
existing ordinance is more, not the new one, the existing one. Just leave it alone.
Excuse me, Jim. Mary, getting back to Chuck's deal of taking the people to court, what is your opinion on that? I mean, do you think that would be enforceable in court? And how long would that take, you know what I mean?
Well,
to
civil
run it through?
litigation certainly can drag on for a while, but, I mean, certainly they have the right to go in and ask the court for, remedies to prevent neighbors who, are creating a nuisance to them. And, that is a remedy in court. I honestly couldn't tell you how long a case like that would take. They're all very individual. Some people may not want to defend it and may just say, fine, enter the judgment against me, I'll stop. It's a crapshoot. Others may fight it vehemently and it could drag on for an extended period of time. It's all,
Chuck, getting back to yours, we do have here the time frames when burning is permissible. So maybe, why go to court when maybe the people that want to burn can contact their neighbor that's got the asthma or whatever respiratory problem, work that out where maybe, hey, today I won't be home or I'll be gone, I'll be on the road doing something different than staying in my house.
And Joe, I'm almost okay with that, but that 300 feet, having that kind of distance.
We have an asthma neighbor.
So that's 300 feet, especially up in our area, it's too much distance. I can't, there's no yards that have that kind of distance away from anybody. So I'm not so opposed to having the discussion about setting up time frames, as long as we're keeping it to our original ordinance numbers that we have with the 50-foot rule, from structures and stuff. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, first, I want to say that, this has been a long discussion, but we've addressed this. You mentioned, was this been a year? We revised this ordinance 3 years ago. I think we adopted it maybe 2 years ago. So the current ordinance is a refashioned ordinance, and we discussed in detail what we were really trying to accomplish, and we also knew where there could be a little controversy. When we passed this current ordinance, we basically wanted to ban burning in subdivisions, because it is more village-like or city-like or urban. And the current ordinance basically stopped, as long as it's being enforced, has stopped all burning in subdivisions where people live close together. We also know, because Joe brought it up, his concern was, municipalities butt up to the unincorporated area or start to go into the rural area. Now the question is, and we talked about it then, because a village now encroaches on someone else, because this is really, with this, even when we hear some of the issues we have today, it's where people live in municipalities and they butt up to basically rural unincorporated areas. So now, we have this issue, it was an issue then. We decided that it has very little impact on burning, and in fact it does. These situations where you might have a municipality butting up to a rural area where people are unreasonable or feel they have to burn or whatever, you know, I think those situations are far and few between. You know, I do have a problem with if someone has some respiratory problem within 300 feet, you know, that now people can't burn. First, I think it's unenforceable. And by the way, I think the Sheriff's Department has told you it would be almost impossible to enforce. So now you want to pass an ordinance that's going to be very difficult to enforce. So I do think that, and I would support limited burning days, time of year. You know, if we can't let people have 7, 8, 9 weeks to do this, maybe limit to certain days. You can't burn more than 3 hours at a time. I mean, there are other ways to address this. Now, I'm going to talk about my township a little bit, and I'm going to tell you that the Frankfort Township Highway Commissioner, when we passed this ordinance, decided he was going to do leaf pickup. And indeed we do. And we do it for everybody, including the people who are in the state rural residential, which we still have in Frankfort. And people may not think that, but we still have a lot of unincorporated area that is rural, residential rural. And in Frankfort Township, literally, even in the rural part, nobody burns. Because we pick up the leaves, we educate them, we tell them, you just get those leaves out to the road, we'll come and suck them out. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is there is options to this. But let me I'll tell you what it costs. We had to buy 2 trucks, because 1 truck isn't enough to do it, so we bought 2 leaf sucker uppers or vacuums. And so it's 2 trucks. You have to have 2 men on the truck because they blow the leaves into another container. When they get full, they sit down and throw it back and forth. And so the capital cost for 2 trucks and a leaf box was $90,000. So we spent about another $30,000 a year in operational costs. Now in our case, in Frankfort Township, we already have the manpower, so they have to be doing something. So I suppose you could say, well, we're just utilizing our current staff and how they and their work. But I'm still going to throw out the number to say, no, there is some cost to it. I really think that if the county wants to pass something that basically is just going to ban burning, then,
No, this isn't good bad.
well, Joe, it's pretty close. And you can say 300 feet, 1,000 feet, you know, I don't know where it would end. I don't know if it would, and I don't know. Well, I'll tell you the truth, I don't know for sure, but certainly when you're talking about people with respiratory difficulties, and I understand there's a lot of them, I have, you know, I think they do need consideration. You know, we do have to recognize, you know, there are some people that are just bad neighbors, and there's no matter what you do, or how much sugar you try to sprinkle on them, they just don't sweeten up everything, you know. I used to have one of those neighbors, she's gone now. But I also recognize she wasn't quite right, so, you know, I ignored her. I mean, if we're going to basically ban burning, then I think we need to help provide solutions. And because you may not always recognize, you could say, I'm a mulcher. I got a lawn guy, so my lawn guy mulches all my life. I think a lot of people mulch, you know, I mean, that's, really got a lot of trees, they can't mulch. And for some, and I have a couple of my township, because I've had to go talk to them, and let them know that they could push the leaves out because they live in these rural areas, and even though they were still able to burn, I still wasn't talking about not burning. You know, some were a little bit older, fixed income, and quite frankly, they don't have any money. You know, I got people that on, you know, Social Security, maybe a $200 pension, and, you know, I'm gonna tell them bag their leaves or whatever, or go out and buy new mulching mowers, you know. So, you give them some help to make sure at least you have this. My point is you have to help provide solutions if you're gonna ban it. And you have to have something that's enforceable. And I'm not so sure what you're proposing is yet enforceable. The only other thing I would throw out there is if there's a problem transitioning from urban to rural, or from villages and cities to rural, you know, maybe we could put a little bit more of a buffer there and say, you know, if you're within, whatever, if you butt up to the municipal boundary, you know, or whatever, 200 feet out from the municipal boundaries, whatever, you know, you have to comply to the municipal type regulations. I think that maybe we could look at some transitional area.
I like that, I could deal with that.
I mean, so, and by the way, you know, I really do want us to have a solution. I really do want people's health situations to be protected. So I do think that we could potentially look at transition areas, which I think is reasonable. Because once you really get into the real rural areas, those people don't complain about it because, you know, they're used to living that lifestyle. It's the lifestyle they want. So anyway, I went on long enough.
Getting back to that 300 feet that Tom and I agreed on. Now, I want to compare that to Wrigley Field. On a windy day, if you hit a ball from home plate down to the left field foul line, that's about 305, 306 feet. On a windy day, that ball's going to go over the bleachers. On a windy day, how far will that smoke go over 300? It's going to go over 300 feet.
Well, then you just make the point, Joe, that 300 feet doesn't mean that much.
Yes, it does.
It's an
The wind is what does it.
Well, I don't know how you stop the wind. I know what you're saying.
Jackie, did you want to say something?
Well, I just had a couple of comments. You know, I'm glad to hear Jim's different attitude today.
Well, you know, first off, I have to tell you, I was making reference to when somebody tells me about all the people who have respiratory, it came out terribly, I felt.
It really did. You should have.
But I will explain it to you, Jackie. When somebody tells me about all the people who have respiratory diseases, and believe me, I have relatives, I'm expecting someday maybe it'll pop up on me because I've been smoking for many years. Many people who have these conditions, not all, but many, is because due to their own lifestyles. And that was really what I was referring to. Not the fact that we shouldn't, you know,
it's my turn to talk, and I would disagree with you. Many people have this because they have asthma. So many is an interesting number. How many is many?
How many is many?
What's big government? Give me the number.
One. But we're not talking about many, we can talk about it's just one.
Exactly. So, I mean, it could be any number you want it to be. So, I mean, I grew up with a school teacher on my block that had emphysema. She worked in the school every day. She was never around smokers. She did not smoke. She had emphysema. And that has nothing to do with anything that she did in her lifestyle. Just bad genes, luck of the draw. Same thing with asthma. But asthma is not rare, and it's very, very common. You just don't always know about it because people don't just announce, I have asthma. But you probably would find that there are plenty that do. But I liked to hear the concept that apparently in our ordinance already, and I somehow missed this, we don't allow burning in subdivisions? I heard that comment from somebody here on this side.
Because our setbacks basically prevent it.
No, they do not. 50 feet does not include buildings, sheds, or anything else.
I would support language.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, most subdivisions are lots are 150.
I would definitely like some clarification on that, and if our ordinance doesn't support a ban on burning, you know, in subdivisions, I think that's something we should consider. If the subdivision is located in the unincorporated area, it's basically its own little municipality, and if municipalities don't burn, then the subdivision shouldn't burn. The other thing, you know, we've got unincorporated areas that are lot smack dab in the middle of big municipalities. Naperville is a prime example. All those houses along lever ends that should be a part of Naperville, but they're unincorporated.
And they like it.
They
And they would move into the incorporated area.
They want someone more people telling them what they're gonna do.
But they live in the center of a municipality. If they're within the boundaries of the municipality, then,
No, the municipality came around them, they were there first.
well,
And to Steve's point, to have someone that's been living there with their family and owning property for a century.
was it my turn to talk? I guess it
Sorry,
was.
I apologize, but you need to.
I've been interrupted twice by the Republican leadership. Twice.
You're looking at me talking.
I'm looking at lots of people talking.
You're talking about my community, so I wanted to respond to you. Sorry. Apologize, Jack.
Thank you. If you live within the municipality, I get that the municipality came and encroached all around you, but you knew it was coming, and, change happens. I would love for things to be the way they were in the beginning, that we all lived in the quote-unquote Garden of Eden, but we don't. And we have to deal with change, and it's difficult and it's hard. But we have more and more people suffering from asthma, and for whatever various reasons, I'm not a scientist, couldn't tell you why we've seen these increased numbers, but we have. And I think for us to just stick our head in the sand and just continue on with the same ordinance when we have a problem is a problem. And my next thing is just a question, and maybe Mary can answer this, about going to court. If I was in this situation and wanted to take my neighbor to court, would I need to hire an attorney?
You never have to hire an attorney ever. You can always represent yourself. So it's whether or not you feel confident enough as to whether you can present your case to a court or without an attorney.
So it could potentially cost me some money if I feel the need to hire
could
the
be an
attorney.
expensive proposition, yes.
Thank you.
All right, my first comment when we were talking about this, and a lot of these comments are a lot of on emotion and opinions and everything, and I said, our constituents, our voters, of that, in fact, live in unincorporated because they don't like rules. That was always my stand. But then I took, after this really got so much more that I went and I made phone calls. And I called our highway commissioner. I said, what is the deal? And I'm thinking the same thing. We're in Naperville, we're in corporate, is this that big of an issue? He said, let me tell you what kind of an issue it is. It's one thing if we went and we got the vacuum. And we picked it up, we got the machine, all right, 90,000 like you're saying. But it's what you do with the leaves after.
$8,000 a year costs us.
He said it will take 2 hours, where we would have to, in Wheeling Township, we'd have to go 2 hours to decal it, to the farm there, and go and spread it. Then we have to pay for every cubic yard. I think it was something of that of like $4.90. And he said, if you want me to go get the dollar amounts, we could. And after then calling Naperville and talking with Novak, with others, and said, we cannot do this. We have a farm. We have to switch farms out in DeKalb every 2 years. So we sit there and we talk about, what's going on in the amount of dollars. If we're looking at this as dollar and cents, you're taking out the emotion, and we're not talking common sense of these people that have just been burning. And then the other thing that I was sitting here thinking, okay, we changed this ordinance, which frankly, I don't want to touch it at all. But we change it. Who's going to go and notify all of these unincorporated that they now have? Here are the times. Who's doing that? Are we going to do that? Are we going to have to go pay, like get mailers out and people out and say, this is when you're going to be able to go ahead and burn? Oh, by the way, if someone comes in and they have asthma, you're not going to be able to burn. Now, what are they going to do with those leaves? That person. So how are we going to address that? I mean, these are all the things that I'm thinking as we're having these conversations right now.
I believe there's good news that we're gonna, the way we're gonna be able to put it out there and get it to the people. I mean, right now, I have no idea what.
Then we shouldn't pass this if we don't have any idea.
Mr. Bellich.
One of the things that hasn't been brought up, besides property rights, which is a constitutional right that we're granted in the Declaration of Independence and a couple other amendments, but what about the undue burden that this puts on people with a long flag lot? If they don't burn in their backyard and in their front yard, how long does it take a guy, and what if he's a senior? How long does it take him to get the leaves from the back of their property to the front of their property, or in the middle of their property? This is a burden that we're putting on people, and there's a lot of flag lots like that in my district. And I think that we have to just leave it alone. That more layers of rules is not the answer.
Any more comments from, wait a minute, Beth?
I just wanted some clarification on the current ordinance. I am unclear about what's allowed in the subdivision. I know you had one idea, we had another idea, as far as the subdivision and the 50-foot setback.
The current ordinance that's on record right now is 50 feet from any neighboring structure. That does not eliminate burning in any subdivision. You're allowed to burn in any subdivision currently.
Okay, so.
You can meet those.
You meet those requirements.
And it's 50 feet from neighboring structure currently.
And pretty much the subdivision pretty much eliminates burning.
And as I stated before, our hot areas are the New Lenox area, the Joliet area, and the Lockport area on the hill. That's where most of our burning complaints come from currently.
And we cannot legislate just because of it.
Go ahead, Beth. Continue.
I just want to say that I want a solution too, but I think one of the things that keeps getting repeated that is completely false, that this is just in reaction to a few people. It's about questions about air quality. There's a few people that are lucky enough to come to meetings. I know that you're talking about motion. I have a family of asthmatics. No one smokes, we exercise, we live a healthy lifestyle. I embrace this notion that it's not contained to the property. I have property rights just like the next person. It's not contained, you don't own the air, so it's bigger than just what happens on your property. So we're not considering this because of one or two people that show up at our meetings. We're considering this because of concerns about what that air quality does to people with the problem. I can go right next to a fire and have no problem. It's not me, but we're addressing this for more than just 2 or 3 people. People keep saying, we're making an ordinance for 2 or 3 people, and it's just, those are the people that are coming to the meetings.
I have a problem with snow blowers. Every time my neighbors blow snow, I gag from the gas fumes. Do we ban snow blowing? And that's where we're headed, because the fumes go all over the place with big snows.
I'm just saying that there were petitions signed and stuff, so the numbers of people concerned about it in those hot areas that you described are more than just, is all I'm saying.
If it applies to that, it should apply to cars and snow blowers and any kind of thing that puts emissions out there. So we ban anything that's going to have any emissions in the air, because gas emissions bother me.
Jim, last.
Joe, I want to get away from leaf burning for a second, okay? Because burning is burning. I mean, we have recreational fires, we have, even though I know people aren't outside, I smell smoke and fumes or whatever coming out of fireplaces in my neighborhood all the time. Even though they're burning inside, all the emissions goes outside, depending what they're burning. So, we keep taking this to any degree we like, but let's stick out barbecuing, smokers, recreational fires, campfires. And if the Boy Scouts are out there, they got stuff with their campfires? No, I'm exaggerating a little bit, of course, but my point is, you can go on and on. So this burning, even if we can address leaf burning, I will tell you that I have neighbors who have outdoor fire pits. I have neighbors who, got these portable pits, like to sit out in the summer and do a fire in the evening. So when we start talking about burning, we're going to have to classify really what kind of burning. You kind of lump them. You mentioned recreational fires, however you want to address that. Certainly, and there are no reasons. We're not suggesting that they can't, but I'm not so sure it's really clear what people can do as far as recreational fires are burning, because I've got to call them fires. And even, for example, you talk about, I don't think anybody has any neighbors got to be smokers, but I'll tell you what, they can throw a lot of smoke too. And some of those, I think you have to be really careful on what you're doing here. If you're talking about leaf burning, then talk about leaf burning. just don't talk about burning, because we do have other nuisance burning that we hopefully would enforce. So, here again, I think you need to really make very sure, this is very clear, because it seems to me, you take leaf burning, and now, and it's gonna affect every other type of recreational fires that people may have, including outdoor, I mean, you say, well, exclude outdoor cooking, but if I'm out there at a fire, I got a hot dog on a stick today, I'm outdoor cooking. I mean, so, I do think, we have to be clear on what exactly we're trying to accomplish. And I'd actually like to hear how many complaints we have in here, because I don't think it is that many.
We did address the outdoor cooking fires after the last county board meeting, and we did put in a paragraph saying outdoor cooking fires with the use of charcoal, propane, or camping fuel may be located adjacent to or upon a structure.
But it's a wood sort of fire.
Mark? That would be a fire containing a patio wood burning unit, which shall be 15 feet from it.
No, I actually throw wood in my charcoal grill.
Hardwood. Cherry, smoking.
But Tim, could you review the whole current for the committee?
Can I review the whole?
Can you review it, because everybody has
The highlights. All right,
so that everybody has a working idea of what's in this whole document.
okay. 93.018, location of fires. We changed 1,000 feet to 300 feet, unless otherwise specifically provided for herein from any school, park, hospital, nursing home, and/or residence of a person with a chronic respiratory disease. Now, from what I understand today, a lot of people have issues with the chronic respiratory disease, and I was wondering if we took that out, if there would be any objection from a school, park, or hospital, or nursing home.
Question. Is this the proposed ordinance, or is this our current ordinance?
So this is a revised edition of our current ordinance.
Okay, but in our current ordinance, we don't have 300 feet, we don't have that paragraph, do we?
No.
Correct.
Okay, so the way this is written, it looks like this is our current, because that's not underlined as an addition, so I
Yeah,
want to make
this is all
sure,
black and white.
I want to make sure, to my colleague's point here, what is our current ordinance versus the proposed language that you're wanting to put in here? So could you identify that, please?
You don't have it.
I've got so many copies of.
You don't have it because there have been so many changes in the original ordinance. We didn't know where the starting point should be for this meeting. However, to address that point, the only changes we have in here are the COPD, the 20 feet from the roadway, the limitations as to when you can burn. Tim, what am I missing?
That's a lot of stuff. So I would like to see the original.
That's from the last draft, though.
Yeah.
No, if you could give us, I would suggest, based upon this discussion today, if you could give us some direction, we will go back to the original ordinance. We will come back with changes to the original ordinance that you direct us to make. And what I'm hearing.
We get to see that. That'd be great.
What I'm hearing today
Yeah.
is you're against COPD. Fine. I hear from Mr. Eustace that he may be willing to consider limitations as to the time you can burn. If that's a direction, that's already in this draft, that's something we can leave in. I'll go back to the original ordinance and make that change.
Bruce, all I'm asking is, in most copies, when we have additional information, we underline that so that we know the difference between, and that's not in this, and it would be nice to be able to see that so that we know the additional stuff versus what's not. That's all I'm asking.
This has been an 8-year discussion, and this year, it's been a several-month discussion.
I understand.
So I'm saying we can go back and do that, but just understand why we got to this point.
Understand.
Okay,
Yeah, no, I just want to, I just think that I'm going to.
Tim's gonna be so
I'd like to let you know what I think I can support.
this is all new, it should be on.
I can support limited actually your burn. I can support limiting the days, maybe 3 days a week. I would support the length of time you can burn, maybe that's 3 hours. I would support having a buffer around schools, hospitals, nursing homes, and so forth. I have a more difficult time with anyone with a respiratory problem within 300 feet. I still have a difficult time with that. First, I think it'd be extremely difficult to enforce in the beginning. And I think, I can support those changes, and I think that's reasonable. You know what, you're maybe lucky to burn 6 weeks out of the year, maybe 1 week in the springtime. You tell them you can only burn on whatever, make it odd days or whatever, you can only burn for 3 hours. I think that accommodates people who do have some respiratory issues, because they're not locked in their house all day, it's limited. And I would also support a transition, depending on how many feet, but a transition from municipalities to the unincorporated area. All those I think I can support, and I think, you have a good ordinance. I really do. And I think you're addressing 99% of any issues that are out there. So I'm just wanting to throw that out.
I concur with Mr. Musis about the chronic respiratory disease. It is going to be hard to enforce for the enforcement officers. You got 3 in land use, and I don't know how many sheriffs there are, but the sheriff's department said they had 160-some complaints within last year, and they have other things to do. I also heard Mr. Musis say that he's fine with the school, park, hospital, nursing home setback. The one thing that I'm concerned about with the setbacks from villages is, let's take Frankfurt, for example. I believe Frankfurt just incorporated not too long ago Steger Road, which were unincorporated at one time.
They don't know it.
Right.
They don't work it, but anyways, they do have parts of Steger Road. Municipalities don't have.
Right, at any time,
these lines.
anytime a municipality can annex, and the county says, yeah, go ahead. So, I mean, you're gonna have boundary changes constantly over the years. We also have Joliet, Ridgewood area, that you have one house in Joliet, the next house is unincorporated, and then the next 2 houses are within Joliet. So you have things like that, so. That's gonna be a concern also.
I'm gonna let him wind it up.
There's an issue that we really need to address, Joe, and you told me to come to committee to make these issues.
Let Donnie speak first. Okay, let Donnie speak.
I'll try to be brief. The problem here, like we said, a one-size-fits-all approach is really hard, especially because we've got our rural areas down south, we've got our urban areas up north, and that's where the difficulty comes in, And it's not my district that's calling to change the ordinance, for sure. And I don't think it's the southern half of the county in general. To Bruce's suggestion, if you took the current ordinance and you incorporated, for example, these times or dates that you could burn, okay? And then everybody knew, okay, everybody knows this is the time of the year that you can burn, okay? That's something that's not in the current ordinance that people could probably learn to live with, knowing that, look, you don't get it done by this day and you're subject to prosecution and the rest of it. That's a suggestion here. The enforceability of the 300 feet. The biggest problem I have with that from the beginning, from the inception, is that it's almost a rotating ordinance. People move every day. So you're illegal on Monday, and on Tuesday you're illegal because you got a new neighbor. Or maybe you were illegal and then they move and now you're legal again. That's a good the law changes every day. How do you enforce it? How do people know whether, gee, the guy 299 feet just sold his house? Am I going to be illegal or illegal? I don't know. You're going to have a problem enforcing that. So I think if you took your current ordinance and you restricted the times of the year when you allow burning that would be a major step, forward.
One last question.
Okay, and I'm actually totally in agreement with that. The one thing that I would throw on that is that when we were talking about alternating, you might want to do odd, even, set up the days, just like you do sprinkler systems when there's droughts. Because how would you like to have everybody burning on the same day? It would make it even worse. So my only point is if we go do that we want to go in and maybe look at some, alternating days for odd, even, just for discussion, because if you have 5 or 10 people burning all at the same time, it makes it quite difficult.
The only thing I know, and for someone who lived unincorporated 16 years myself, most of the burning is going on the weekend because people are working during the week. And that's when they go out and they work in their yards is on the weekends. It's the only time of the year in the fall that they're going out there on Saturday and Sunday. That's when they're doing this.
I just wanted to put that out on the table for this discussion.
Bob Howard back there.
Yeah. Just real quick, in all fairness to all the county board members, this is so controversial. Let Bruce Freefeld have the chance to actually give us something we can actually read. Don't push this thing through, don't rush this thing through, because, we'd like to see, a red line, what comes out of the meeting today, because what happens is, I could leave the room for 2 hours and come back and we're still in the same spot. So, all I'd like to see is something in writing before I'm asked to vote on it at the full county board, so.
There is no burning going on right now.
I think that's what we already had ready to go.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much, Dave. The one thing I want to reiterate, and it has been mentioned, but I want to reiterate it, is, the sheriff's department is our most expensive department. Now we're talking about adding more costs and more work onto a department that's already over budget. And we need to be very cautious about that, because we're putting a lot on the sheriff with these ordinance changes to patrol this and to be telling people on a rotating basis, you're illegal, you're illegal, and they don't have the time or the personnel to do that now. So we can't say on one hand, you have to hold to the budget, and on the other hand, oh, and by the way, you have to enforce this very unknowable.
We understand that.
Yeah, so I would caution us.
Mary?
And I'm not sure exactly where we're going or anything, but with regard to what's in the packet, there is, in the exemption section, there is a reference to recreational fire, and yet we deleted the definition for recreational fire. So if we leave that alone, I think we need to understand, there needs to be some communication to staff as to what the intent of the committee is, as to what are recreational fires. If we're gonna exempt them out. Are they the fires that are in recreational clubs? Are they the kids in the backyard having a couple of logs burning and they're roasting marshmallows? And I'm probably talking about the kids in the southern part of the county, because I don't know that that's the entertainment in the northern part of the county.
You're right, though, weather.
But, okay, so I don't know what recreational fires are, so if we could get some guidance on that, that would be helpful.
Okay, what I'm gonna do, give 2 minutes to the people that have signed up. Dr. Shields, you're next. You wanted to speak, you signed up to speak?
No, they just asked me if I was gonna speak.
He has an agenda item, there was a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, Mark, you didn't wanna say anything?
No, really, we were just making sure that agriculture is gonna remain exempt in the process.
Yeah.
Well, agriculture is by state statute exempt.
Understand, but let's.
Just so you know, you're not.
Setbacks to the effect of those burns.
That's true.
I understand. Debbie?
Yeah, I know Marlene's chomping at the bit here, so I don't know if she wants to go first. Do you want to go first? Okay, all right. I just had a few items, and I had looked at the ordinance. I didn't have privy to the ordinance that you have tonight, so my comments had to do with the old ordinance. So I kind of have to change a few things around. First of all, I liked a lot of Jim's comments until he gave me a point about certain days of burning and certain hours of burning. I like what's in the new ordinance about certain months. You talked about the sheriff's department. Do we really want them to be going around the county putting out fires? This is an odd day, this is an even day, you're past 4 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever. One of the things that kind of concerned me is the recreational fires. I think they're 2 separate issues, and they seem to be combining. One of the things that I saw in the previous proposed ordinance was about the 1,000 feet, now 300 feet from park, school, or whatever. What about when the schools are closed or not in use? What about if the school or a person with chronic respiratory is within the 300 feet of the forest preserve, or someone in the agricultural area burning? Then what? You know, do they still get to burn just because they're the government or, you know, agriculture? The big thing is the recreational clubs in the area where I live. The ordinance in that first paragraph says that only one fire shall exist on the property at any given time. Well, the owner is the recreation club. Does that mean they can only have one fire on their property at one time? I think that's something that needs to be clarified or looked at. I know there's a rec club in our area where, well, this was about 1,000 feet. They would be able to have fires near their campsite because they would be, you know, being less than 1,000 feet from a school and park. They also couldn't meet the requirements because they'd be more than 50 feet from any structure or motor vehicle. A lot of times those campers are right there next to your campsite when you're burning. So I think those things need to be clarified. Same with our forest reserves. There's rules by the structures. Now I see you're going to allow it in the structure, so you know, maybe that's been addressed. There's a lot of schools in unincorporated areas. At homecoming time, they have bonfires. Now you can't use their school. So do you get rid of that historic tradition? You know, those are just things that you need to look at. There's a lot of people in the county that live near schools and hospitals and so on. They've been burning for years with no problems, no complaints. And now all of a sudden you're telling them that they can't do something that they've been doing for years. Like Don has always said, I said it too, that it's not a one-size-fits-all issue. The rules that you impose on one person necessarily aren't good for the next person or the next part of the county. So I just, please take everyone into consideration when you make a decision and not just a few. You talked about, I do believe that you could go on an individual case-by-case basis. If you have a problem with a neighbor, take it to court. Yeah, you might have to spend some money, but this way the county is spending the money. The taxpayers are spending the money with the sheriff's department going around, the state's attorney prosecuting it. It's our money, it's the taxpayers' money. You know, if you have an issue with your neighbor, you something to do, if they do something else on your property, that's great. Thank you.
One last comment.
Where to begin? First of all, thank you for those that have worked so diligently on changing this ordinance several times. Thank you, especially to Tim, Bruce, my representatives in New Lenox Township. There's a couple misstatements that have been made. Number one of the changes that are in the new ordinance that does not exist in the previous ordinance is the definition of buildings. The definition of buildings in the old ordinance is 50 feet, but it does not include sheds, fences, railroad tracks, or anything like that that is in the current proposed ordinance. I would suggest that the definition of structures, if you're looking at the old ordinance and the new ordinance, needs to be changed. Number two, I, and especially my husband, was very upset in regards to the remark that was made that, and also restated today, that people with this problem, many of whom have led a lifestyle that has led to this disease. Well, I'm certain that no board member would indicate that the 14,000 asthmatic children living in Will County have done anything to indicate that they want to be ill. Lastly, yes, anyone can be sued. It is extremely expensive to sue anyone, and you have to have substance for a suit. If there is an existing law that precludes the elements in that suit, you're suing for naught. Lastly, every transition, every law that has ever been made in this country for the welfare of other people has been difficult to accept. I have a lead foot. I will be the first to admit that. When the speed limit was changed, I didn't really like that. But for the welfare of other people, it is great to have a speed limit. Child care booster seats and the laws that have related to that. The first argument that came up in putting in child restraint seats in cars was, how in the world are we going to enforce this with parents? I don't see any problem at this point. I feel that you're looking for enforcement to the wrong people. Well, let me make one other point. I have 50 trees on my property. I mulch. I don't have a mulching expensive mower. My husband goes through and he cuts the grass 3 different times in 3 different directions. Then we put those leaves underneath our 50 trees. And thus, it holds down the weeds. So we're reusing. Scientific fact is that leaf burning is totally different. And if you had Googled, like was suggested at the board meeting, leaf burning is totally different than wood burning. Nobody is suggesting that wood burning be eliminated. I have neighbors that burn wood in their fireplace. That is not the kind of smoke that causes problems for anybody with a respiratory illness or anyone else that's affected by bad air. Leaf burning mold is extremely deadly. It's extremely toxic in the same way that burning plastic is extremely toxic. Lastly, any transition is difficult. But the enforcement of this, I don't think should be put on the police department, and I don't think that the county should pick up the leaves. I think there's enough elements out there to take care of it naturally with mulching, etc., that if I, with 50 trees on a postage stamp lot, can do it, anybody can. In terms of the elements in the new ordinance, it is a transition. It is for the public well-being and safety, which I think what you are all here for is supposed to be that. I'm not asking you to put in this ordinance because of me. I have other means. But I am asking you to think about the vast majority of people that can't make it to these meetings. The parents of asthmatic children, the senior citizens. You have less than 12 handicap parking spaces out there. How in the world is a group of senior citizens or handicapped people going to be able to make it into these buildings? Plus, the public that we're talking about, they can't get out of their house in the extreme cold weather. Lots of you have laughed about this ordinance. You think it's funny. Scott Slocum, the day after the board meeting, put out there how many people are in favor of leaf burning. It was about a 50-50 split. I would have rather, he asked, if someone lived next to you that had an asthmatic child or in the next block, would you continue to leaf burn? This ordinance affects the air. It also affects the cost of insurance in Will County, both health insurance and fire insurance. In case you don't realize, you're paying a higher rate for fire insurance because you have open burning. The rate of uncontrolled fires, burning structures, is up. Thank you very much.
Okay, I got one last question. Herb.
Thank you.
Judy?
I only got
We're running short on time.
I understand that, but here's the whole thing. Here's the whole thing. I don't think this is something that's going to be resolved today. Bob mentioned about Bruce going back, bringing something. They've done this time and again. I think what we should do more is go to our caucuses and discuss this. This is a very important issue to many people on both sides, okay? And I don't think we're ever going to make anybody happy. But what we have to remember is that we have to make decisions that are good for the county as a whole. And this is for the unincorporated people. That's who we make these rules for. We don't make these rules for the people who live in municipalities, okay? And we keep trying to take those rules and place them upon the people who live in the unincorporated areas. So you need to. I'll take a poll right here sitting at this table. And Bob, please join me. Everybody who lives in an unincorporated area in Will County, raise your hand. Who's on the county board? Who's on the county board? Okay, so the majority of people live in an incorporated area. We need to think about that. We can't make a decision we can't make ordinances to protect everybody against every single thing out there. It's absolutely impossible. And we continue to do that day after day after day, is take away something somebody does and infringe upon their right to live their life. I understand that people who have illnesses, it's a terrible thing, it's a horrible thing. But there are so many different things that apply to so many different aspects, okay? And if we're just gonna look at the bad things of leaf burning, if we're gonna look at the bad things of leaf burning, we need to look at the bad things of emissions from many other things and maybe stop some of those as well. You can't just draw the line and say leaf burning is bad, because if you can Google leaf burning, and like I said, you can Google SOC, which is the Bourbon O'Hare Commission, and see how bad it is to live around an airport. So we need to really think about what we're doing, what we want for our county, and what we want for our constituents. So I think the Democratic caucus should go back and discuss it. We should discuss it and see what's right, because, I mean, I talked to my road commissioners out my way. When they're removing trees, they burn in the road ditch. There ain't anything else for them to do with it.
I'm losing my voice, and I'm trying to save it for the next meeting. However, I agree with you, Judy. One of the things we've heard here on this morning, that we're never going to please all the people all the time with this issue. And it's always going to be a burning issue for a very long time. However, we need to come to some conclusion on this. We've heard the sheriff came and addressed this committee many times. It is almost impossible to enforce this language. They don't have the resources, as Margot said. Debbie Rozak put it very clearly. It's a very difficult ordinance to enforce. Bruce has already been working on so many scratch outs. I can't even get it. I'm getting dizzy about it. So, but we need to go back to our caucuses and we need to sit down. And lastly, I would say this. There's been a lot of comments that have been made in this committee, in executive and on the floor. And I do recognize we've had audience and some of them may be offensive. However, I do believe, as has been said before, this is a very emotional issue. Very emotional. And the comments that have been made, I have heard apologies. Perhaps they may not have been the correct words to use. But you got to remember this. We're trying to work together to come to a solution. And at this point, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we need to come together.
Mr. Bandage, can I say one thing about enforcement that I forgot to say? I don't think the police department is the right place to put enforcement. Because the people that are seeing the people affected by the fires are the ambulance drivers and the firemen that are responding to the calls to take somebody to the hospital, to those types of things. I don't understand why a simple note picked up somebody with asthma because their neighbor is burning isn't sufficient.
After all of our discussion, I'm looking for a motion to table it. Second. All in favor and say aye?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Next month again. Now, we're gonna be into this thing, and leaf burning is gonna be already started. Okay, moving right along. Any other old business? What's the place on file, Office of Education Report? Moved by Gould, second by Collins, all in favor, say aye. Any nays? Request to renew intergovernmental agreements for animal control. Dr. Shields, you want a minute?
I don't think I need to explain anything here. Nothing is different than what we've been doing for a number of years. And I was just basically here to answer questions that any of the board members or the
I got all these things, I believe that they're all pretty much the same. Are there any exceptions? No.
They are, and it's been the board's policy in the past. We've often wondered, do we have a right to reject some municipalities that might be a little less for us? They told us basically, if we're going to offer is available to any municipality or county that wants to maintain that. It's a little bit difficult, like with Shanahan and some of the municipalities that border or transfer over into another county. A little bit of a jurisdictional issue for us, but again, the board has always told us in the past, they don't have a problem if our equipment does go into that other county enforcing the ordinances of animal control.
They meet your agreement. I say all of them meet your agreement?
They do.
Okay.
They
Okay,
do.
need a motion to establish, to renew and government agreements for the animal control for Braidwood, Shannon, Elwood, Godley, Homer, Glen, Manhattan, New Lenox, Plainfield, Shore, Simmerton, and Willington. Moved by Collins, seconded by Rice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? So moved. Jennifer, you got a word?
No.
So I might add one other thing, we have not changed our fee structure on these intergovernmental agreements for, it's been 6 years. We're on the same fee schedule now that we adopted at that time, and this is going to go on another 3 years. We feel that with the economic pressures on a lot of municipalities and such, this is a good service we're offering, and I don't think it's being detrimental to our department.
Thank you. Sunny Hill replacement's motion, Rule, second by Ferry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any other new business brought forward? No executive session. I need an adjournment for next meeting March 13th. Second by Collins, all in favor?
Yeah, that executive meeting's after.
Any nays? So moved.